Samantha clutched her bag tightly, exhaustion written all over her face as she boarded the crowded train. She had just completed an endless shift at work, and her legs felt like jelly. Searching desperately for a seat, she stumbled toward the only empty space beside a sharply dressed man who was too engrossed in his laptop to notice her presence. As the train rattled on, Samantha leaned back and closed her eyes for just a moment, planning to stay awake. But the rhythmic clatter of the tracks and her overwhelming fatigue betrayed her. Without realizing it, she slowly tipped sideways, her head landing softly on the stranger's broad shoulder. A few minutes later, with a sudden jolt from the train, her whole body slumped against him, her cheek pressed against his lap. The man, Adrian, looked down in surprise, his first instinct to shake her awake. But something about her peaceful, innocent face stopped him. Instead, he awkwardly placed his hand above her, shielding her from curious eyes. For the first time in a long while, he smiled genuinely at how fate had tossed a complete stranger right onto his lap. When the train came to an abrupt halt at the next station, Samantha stirred slightly but didn't fully wake. Adrian hesitated, uncertain whether to wake her or let her rest. People were getting on and off, and more than a few threw amused glances at the unusual sight of a grown woman snoozing comfortably on a stranger. Adrian cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to pretend everything was normal. He adjusted his jacket to cover her a little more, protecting her from the cold air sneaking in through the open doors. Despite the oddity of the situation, he found himself feeling oddly protective over this stranger who trusted him enough, even unconsciously, to let her guard down. Samantha finally blinked her eyes open, still dazed. Her gaze slowly traveled from the soft material beneath her cheek, up to the man's bewildered but kind face. Mortified, she bolted upright, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, her hands fumbling for her bag. Adrian chuckled softly, waving his hand as if to brush off her apology. "No harm done," he said in a voice so warm it made Samantha's stomach flutter. Still, she couldn't stop apologizing, her words tripping over each other as she tried to explain her exhaustion. The train lurched again, and in her flustered state, Samantha stumbled right back onto Adrian, this time grabbing onto his arm for balance. Their eyes met, hers wide with shock, his twinkling with suppressed laughter. Samantha yanked her hand away like she had touched fire, sinking miserably into her seat. For the next few minutes, she avoided looking at him, her heart pounding loudly in her ears. But Adrian couldn't resist sneaking glances at her. He found her genuinely adorable, messy hair, tired eyes, and all. Something inside him told him that this accidental encounter wasn't going to end here. The train reached its final stop, and Samantha stood, desperate to escape the embarrassment. She hurried down the platform, weaving through the crowd, not daring to look back. But fate had other plans. As she turned a corner, her heel caught on a loose tile, and she went flying straight into the arms of someone. It was Adrian again, his hands firm around her waist, steadying her easily. "We have to stop meeting like this," he teased, and Samantha couldn't help but let out a breathy laugh, her mortification easing slightly. She realized she was still clutching his jacket and quickly stepped back. Adrian, sensing her discomfort, extended his hand in a formal manner. "I'm Adrian, by the way." "And you are?" he asked. Samantha hesitated, then smiled shyly and said, "Samantha." For a moment, the busy station faded around them, and it was just the two of them standing in the chaos, oddly connected. They parted ways, but Samantha couldn't shake the strange feeling in her chest. She kept replaying the encounter in her mind, smiling without realizing it. Little did she know, Adrian was experiencing the same thing as he sat in a cafe nearby, staring at his untouched coffee. Days passed, and Samantha assumed she would never see him again. Life went back to normal: work, exhaustion, crowded trains. But one evening, as she boarded the train after another brutal day, her heart skipped when she spotted a familiar figure sitting by the window. Adrian looked up from his book and grinned when he saw her. He motioned to the empty seat beside him. Hesitating for only a heartbeat, Samantha slid into the seat, her cheeks flushed. The universe, it seemed, wasn't quite done with them yet. The train ride was quieter this time, but the silence wasn't awkward. Adrian occasionally pointed out funny things he noticed through the window, and Samantha found herself laughing more freely than she had in weeks. They talked about books, movies, and silly everyday things, completely forgetting the strangers around them. When Samantha dozed off again, she made a conscious effort to stay awake, but her exhaustion betrayed her once more. This time, when her head drooped, Adrian was ready. He gently guided her head onto his shoulder, smiling softly as she sighed in her sleep. By the time the train reached her stop, Adrian was reluctant to wake her. He gently whispered her name, and when she woke, there was a softness between them that hadn't been there before. They exchanged numbers before she left, and for the first time in a long while, Samantha felt giddy as she walked home. Adrian didn't waste time. That night, he texted Samantha a simple, "Did you make it home safely?" Her heart fluttered as she stared at the screen, grinning like a teenager. She quickly replied, and their conversation stretched late into the night, filled with teasing jokes and small confessions about their tiring days. From that night onward, it became a silent tradition. They would meet on the train, sit together, talk, and sometimes just share a comfortable silence. It felt like their own little world, a secret place between destinations where nothing else mattered. Samantha no longer dreaded her long days knowing Adrian would be waiting at the end. One evening, a heavy storm delayed the trains. The station was flooded with angry commuters, but Samantha only scanned the crowd for one face. When she spotted Adrian waving from under a dripping umbrella, her heart skipped. He approached her, grinning. "Guess you're stuck with me a little longer tonight," he said. And for once, being stuck felt perfect. The rain poured harder, forcing them to seek shelter at a tiny coffee stand near the station. They huddled close under the small awning, laughter bubbling between them as they tried to warm their freezing hands around paper cups of cocoa. Samantha couldn't remember the last time she had this much fun doing absolutely nothing. Their laughter slowed, and a strange tension thickened the air. Adrian's eyes softened as he watched her tuck a wet strand of hair behind her ear. For a brief, dangerous moment, he leaned in like he was about to kiss her, but stopped just an inch away, his breath warm on her cheek. Samantha, heart hammering, quickly sipped her drink, breaking the moment. She wasn't ready yet, and Adrian sensed it. He stepped back with a gentle smile, determined not to rush something that felt so real. Instead, he offered his arm, and they walked back to the now-moving trains together, their hands brushing occasionally, sending sparks up her spine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of moments that felt stitched together by fate. Morning coffees, late-night chats, and stolen glances across crowded train stations became the fabric of Samantha's days. Adrian made everything feel lighter, easier, as though life itself had taken a deep breath around him. But just when Samantha was beginning to let her walls down completely, reality crashed back in. One night, she was about to board the usual train when she spotted Adrian, with a beautiful woman clinging to his arm, laughing like they shared 1,000 inside jokes. Samantha froze, her heart crumpling in an instant. Before she could slip away unseen, Adrian's eyes locked with hers. Guilt flickered across his face, but the woman tugged on his sleeve, pulling him away. Samantha turned sharply, blinking away the sting of tears. She felt like a fool. How could she have thought she meant anything to him? Samantha avoided the train for days, taking buses and walking absurd distances just to dodge the possibility of seeing Adrian. She hated how much it hurt, how easily he had gotten under her skin. Had it all been a game to him? Was she just another passing amusement? Meanwhile, Adrian was spiraling. He had tried to call, text, and even wait at the station, but Samantha was nowhere to be found. The woman she saw him with, Clara, was just a family friend visiting from out of town, but how could Samantha have known that? And now she was slipping through his fingers. Determined not to lose her, Adrian finally decided to find her the only way he knew, by riding the train at every possible time she might be on. He spent days sitting alone, watching strangers come and go, hoping for a miracle. Little did he know, fate was about to reward his stubbornness. Samantha finally gave in one rainy evening, too exhausted to take the long route home. She boarded the train with her hood pulled up, head down, praying not to bump into anyone familiar. As she sank into a corner seat, she kept her eyes glued to her phone, ignoring the world. But halfway through the ride, a familiar voice broke through her bubble. "Samantha," Adrian breathed, his relief palpable. She looked up sharply, her heart pounding against her ribs. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught in a whirlwind of emotions too big for words. Adrian sat across from her, his eyes raw and pleading. "It's not what you think. That woman, she's just a family friend. I swear." Samantha wanted to believe him, God, she wanted to, but the wound was still fresh. "I don't know, Adrian," she whispered, blinking rapidly. "I don't know if I can trust what I saw." Instead of pushing, Adrian simply nodded. "Then let me prove it," he said softly. He didn't ask for a second chance, he promised to earn it. Samantha studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deceit. But all she saw was sincerity and a deep, aching hurt that mirrored her own. The train ride ended without any grand declarations. Samantha simply nodded back, a silent agreement to let him try. They parted ways at the station, each walking into the night with heavy yet hopeful hearts. From that night onward, Adrian worked tirelessly to rebuild the fragile bridge between them. Little things, thoughtful texts, waiting with her at the station, sharing homemade cookies, slowly began to weave trust back into their fragile bond. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in colors of fire, Adrian surprised Samantha with 2 tickets. "A small concert at the park," he said, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "Nothing fancy. Just thought you might like it." Samantha hesitated. Stepping outside their little train bubble felt terrifying. But when she saw the hope in Adrian's eyes, she found herself nodding. They arrived just in time to catch the golden hour, bathing the park in magic, laughter and music filling the air around them. For the first time in weeks, Samantha let herself relax fully, swaying slightly to the music beside Adrian. When he gently took her hand in his, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Their fingers entwined as the final notes played, sealing a promise neither of them dared to speak aloud yet. After the concert, they wandered aimlessly, hands still linked. Samantha told him about her childhood dreams, about how she used to imagine traveling the world with a camera. Adrian listened intently, hanging on to every word like it was the most important story ever told. In turn, Adrian confessed his fear of loneliness, how even surrounded by people, he sometimes felt invisible. Samantha squeezed his hand tighter, her heart aching for the boy he must have been. She realized they weren't so different, 2 souls searching for a safe place to land. By the time they reached her street, neither wanted to say goodbye. Samantha stood on her doorstep, fiddling with her keys, while Adrian shuffled awkwardly. Finally, he leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, but she didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of rain, music, and second chances. From that night, everything shifted between them. They were no longer two lonely strangers clinging to fleeting moments. They were something real, something undeniable. Yet, as they grew closer, so did Samantha's fears, gnawing at the edges of her happiness. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was too good to be true. That someday, the bubble would burst, and she would be left with nothing but memories of Adrian's smile. She started pulling away without meaning to, canceling plans and making excuses. Adrian noticed immediately. Instead of pushing, he simply waited, giving her the space she didn't even realize she needed. He kept showing up, small messages, silly memes, coffee deliveries to her work, tiny reminders that he wasn't going anywhere unless she asked him to. Samantha hated how easily Adrian saw through her. No matter how much she tried to keep her distance, he had a way of slipping through the cracks, like sunlight forcing its way through curtains. And the worst part? She didn't actually want him to stop. One evening, she arrived at the station late, hoping to avoid their usual routine. But as the train doors slid open, there he was, leaning against a pole with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "Thought you might need this," he said with a soft smile, handing her one without waiting for an answer. Samantha sighed, taking it, warmth spreading through her fingers and chest. They sat side by side in their usual seats, silence hanging between them. Finally, Adrian turned to her, his voice gentle but firm. "You're pushing me away. I don't know why, but I'm not going to disappear just because you're scared." Samantha's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. But fear had never been easy to silence. That night, Samantha found herself staring at her phone, her thumb hovering over Adrian's contact. She had spent so long running from anything that felt too good, afraid it would be snatched away the moment she let herself believe in it. But what if this time was different? Summoning her courage, she texted him, "I don't want to be afraid anymore." His reply came instantly. "Then don't be. I'm here." It wasn't some grand declaration, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. A promise, simple and true. The next morning, she boarded the train earlier than usual, her stomach a bundle of nerves. When Adrian stepped in, their eyes met across the carriage. He hesitated only for a second before walking over, sliding into the seat beside her. Neither of them spoke, but when Samantha tentatively rested her head on his shoulder, Adrian let out a quiet, relieved sigh. Samantha hadn't realized how much she had missed their quiet, effortless connection until it returned. She started looking forward to their train rides again, to the way Adrian's presence made the world feel a little lighter. Slowly, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. One evening, as the train pulled into the station, Adrian turned to her with a mischievous grin. "What would you say if I told you I have a surprise planned for us this weekend?" Samantha raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I'd say that depends. Is it a good surprise or a bad one?" Adrian smirked. "Definitely a good one." When she hesitated, he added, "No pressure. But I think you'll love it." Samantha bit her lip, considering. Then, feeling daring, she smiled. "Okay. Surprise me." And with that, she let herself fall a little deeper into whatever this was. The weekend arrived, and Adrian led Samantha through the bustling streets, refusing to reveal where they were going. She tried to guess, but he only laughed, keeping her in suspense. Finally, they arrived at an art studio filled with canvases, paints, and a handful of people covered in colorful splatters. A paint and sip class? Samantha asked, surprised. Adrian shrugged. You said you always wanted to try something creative. Thought this might be fun. Her heart swelled at the thoughtfulness behind his plan. As they painted, Adrian got more paint on himself than on his canvas, making Samantha laugh until her stomach hurt. By the end of the night, her cheeks were flushed, and her hands were covered in color. Best surprise ever, she admitted as they walked home. And when Adrian reached for her hand, she didn't hesitate to intertwine her fingers with his. Their relationship deepened in ways neither of them expected. It wasn't just about stolen moments on the train anymore. It was late-night phone calls, weekend adventures, and quiet, everyday moments that made Samantha feel like she had finally found something worth holding on to. But just when everything felt perfect, reality struck. One evening, as they waited for the train, Adrian's phone rang. He answered, his expression shifting from relaxed to tense. Samantha watched as his jaw clenched, his grip on his phone tightening. When he hung up, she asked softly, "Is everything okay?" Adrian forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah. Just work stuff." Samantha wanted to press him, but something in his tone stopped her. She had a sinking feeling that whatever it wasn't just work stuff. Adrian became distant after that call. He still showed up, still smiled, but there was something guarded in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Samantha didn't know how to ask without sounding like she was prying, so she let it go. One evening, as the train rattled along, Adrian turned to her suddenly. "What if I told you I might have to leave for a while?" Samantha's stomach twisted. "Leave?" she echoed. "Where?" Adrian hesitated, his fingers drumming on his knee. "It's complicated. I might have to relocate for work." Samantha's heart plummeted. She had just started to believe in them, and now he was talking about leaving? "For how long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet," Adrian admitted, his expression torn. "It's not finalized, but I didn't want to keep it from you." Samantha nodded slowly, but inside, panic bloomed. Was this it? Was this where their story ended? For the next few days, the uncertainty hung over them like a storm cloud. Neither of them wanted to talk about it, but the weight of what if pressed down on them. Samantha found herself dreading their train rides, afraid they would be counting down to goodbye. One evening, as the train pulled into her stop, Samantha hesitated before stepping off. Instead of saying goodbye like usual, she turned to Adrian and asked, "Would you stay, if I asked you to?" Adrian stared at her, caught between longing and conflict. The doors beeped their warning, but neither of them moved. Samantha regretted the question the second it left her lips. It wasn't fair to ask Adrian to choose between her and his future. As the train doors closed, locking them inside together, she quickly shook her head. "Forget I said that. I don't want you to stay just for me." Adrian exhaled slowly, his eyes filled with emotions too complex to name. "I don't want to leave you, Sam," he admitted. "But I also don't know if I have a choice." That hurt more than she expected. The train ride home was silent, both lost in their own thoughts. When they reached their station, Adrian reached for her hand but hesitated, as if unsure whether she still wanted him to. She did. But she was also terrified that no matter how tightly she held on, he might slip away anyway. Days passed, and the news finally came: Adrian's relocation was official. He would be leaving in a month. The moment he told Samantha, she felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Instead of pretending everything was fine, they made a decision to make the most of the time they had left. They did everything together: late-night walks, movie marathons, visiting every coffee shop in the city. Every moment was tinged with bittersweet urgency, as if trying to squeeze a lifetime into weeks. But no matter how much they tried to ignore it, the day of his departure loomed closer, a clock neither of them could stop. And Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how much she prepared herself, losing him would break her. The night before Adrian's departure, Samantha found herself unable to sleep. She kept replaying every memory they had made, every laugh, every shared glance, every time she had dozed off against him on the train, feeling safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she grabbed her jacket and headed to the station. It was late, almost midnight, but she didn't care. To her surprise, when she reached the platform, she found Adrian already there, sitting on their usual bench, staring at the empty tracks. They looked at each other for a long moment. No words were needed. Samantha simply walked over and curled up beside him, her head finding its familiar place on his lap. He ran his fingers through her hair tenderly, and together, they sat in silence, holding on to the night as if refusing to let morning come. Morning eventually broke, casting a soft golden glow over the station. Neither of them had slept much, but neither cared. Adrian finally whispered, "Come with me." Samantha lifted her head to look at him, her heart thundering. "What?" she breathed. Adrian smiled, but there was a nervousness in it. "I know it's crazy. I know it's fast. But, come with me. We'll figure it out together." Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes. Part of her screamed that it was insane, that she couldn't just leave everything behind. But another part, the part that had trusted him from the moment she accidentally fell asleep on his lap, whispered yes. She threw her arms around him and nodded against his chest, too overcome to speak. The decision was impulsive, reckless even, but for once, Samantha didn't let fear rule her life. She packed lightly, taking only what she needed, and by the afternoon, they were boarding a train, a new one, leading to a new future neither of them could predict. As they sat together, Adrian pulled out a small envelope and handed it to her. Inside was a simple, hand-drawn map, filled with silly little landmarks: best pizza place, perfect sunset spot, where we'll dance in the rain. Samantha laughed through her tears. "This isn't just a move," Adrian said, squeezing her hand. "It's the start of an adventure." Samantha smiled, feeling a wild, giddy hope she hadn't known she was capable of. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. The new city was overwhelming at first, bigger, louder, and unfamiliar. But having Adrian by her side made it feel like home from the very start. They found a tiny apartment with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was theirs, and they filled it with laughter, music, and quiet nights tangled up on the couch. Samantha started working part-time at a cozy little bookstore, while Adrian dove headfirst into his new job. They weren't rich or famous, but they were happy, and that was more than enough. Every morning, they still took the train together. It became their tradition. And almost every ride, Samantha would inevitably doze off, her head finding its way to Adrian's lap or shoulder, just like the first time. It became their private joke, their symbol of everything they had overcome. One chilly morning, as Samantha leaned against Adrian, half asleep and half listening to the train's familiar rhythm, he gently nudged her awake. She blinked up at him, confused. Adrian smiled nervously, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet box. Since you seem to love falling asleep on me, he teased, opening it to reveal a delicate ring. I was thinking maybe you could keep doing it, forever. Samantha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The other passengers faded away. There was only Adrian, looking at her with hope and love shining in his eyes. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she laughed and nodded frantically. Yes. Of course, yes. The entire carriage erupted into cheers and claps as Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger. It was messy, spontaneous, and absolutely perfect, just like them. Their wedding was small, filled with people who had become their family in the new city. They said their vows in a little park overlooking the train tracks, with a passing train rumbling by just as they sealed their promises with a kiss, as if the universe itself was blessing their union. Samantha looked around at the life they had built, the friends they had made, the love they had found, and realized she wouldn't change a single thing. All because, on a random day not so long ago, she had accidentally dozed off on a stranger's lap during a train ride. As the sun set and they danced barefoot in the grass, Samantha rested her head against Adrian's chest and closed her eyes, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Home, she realized, wasn't a place. It was a person. And she had finally found hers.